Hey everyone, the White Belt Masters podcast is sponsored by Anchor. If you haven't heard about what Anchor is, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Number one, it's free. Woo! Two, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Damn. Three, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple, and many more. Can't get any better than that. Four, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership, like this ad right here. Five, it's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. So it ain't that hard. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM. Get it now. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is a White Belt Masters podcast, and I'm your host, Matthew Chong. And follow me on my journey towards life mastery as I share with you what I'm learning and contemplating about wealth, health, and relationships. And you know what? Whatever else we can talk about. So why don't you sit back, relax, and listen as I dive into the topics that's going to take your life to the next level. Be open-minded, be curious. Let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 28 of the White Belt Masters podcast, and I am your host, Matthew Chong. Now, I hope, as my teachers would always say, that you got the book and you read it. And what book is that? So we are talking about The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And we started on the last episode, on episode 27, with a little bit of an intro. I mean, it was kind of long. I mean, I think what you realize when you read this book, he goes very in depth into each of the sections. I mean, he's fully committed to each of the sections that he's writing, I mean, which is good. So it's by no means like a quick and easy read, which is why, I'm trying to break this out into possibly 7 episodes, just because I want to give you guys the context and the full brevity of each of the chapters. Like, for example, like chapter 2 or habit 2 that we'll get into today, it's about a 60 page chapter. So it's by no means like a breeze, like a quick breezy kind of read, right? It goes in depth. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. So habit 2. So habit 1 was be proactive, right? Take the action. Don't wait. Be proactive. Go. Move, act, right? Habit 2. Now we're talking about begin with the end in mind. So begin with the end in mind. Now, what does that mean? So the beginning of the chapter kind of starts, it seems somber, but it should be motivating. So what do I mean by that? It really talks about death being manifested, right? So I'm sitting here, I am 36 years old. And what Stephen R. Covey wants me to do is think about my death. Think about my funeral, right? So if you close your eyes and you're thinking about the day that you are to leave this earth, leave your existence, and you get the chance to be a fly on the wall at this funeral, what would you want people to say about you? Now, it's not, you died tomorrow, and whatever you are today is what people are talking about you. No. Right? Let us have the grace and blessing to assume we'll live another 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, whatever. And as we're thinking about this, what would you want people to say? What would you want people to think? How many people would you want to have be at the funeral? What is the general mood? And the point of this is, if you were somebody who lived with good character and high values, and you were always there for people, generally you would have a room full of people who would obviously be mourning your death, but would have a lot of great things to say. But if you're somebody, let's say you're always scheming for the next move. You're not building relationships. You're using relationships. Then your funeral would look very different. Like, what difference would you want to have made to your inner circle, to those around you, to anybody, right? Now, as I said, this is not a somber exercise. I think this is an awakening exercise. Because seldom do we think about the end. We're always thinking about today and tomorrow. Right? Like, let me just get by today, right? And you do need that. Don't get me wrong. Right? That's the whole point of one foot in front of the other. Don't try not to think about the big picture too much. Because sometimes you will get lost, get overwhelmed, and then quit. This is something a little bit different. This is about your character. Like, these seven habits are really about building your value system, your principles, and your character. And as we mentioned in last episode, it's about shifting your paradigm. So what does this mean about manifesting this death image and having the end in mind? It means starting today with the paradigm that your end is near. So how would you live it then? Right? It's like goal setting, right? In goal setting, if you don't know where the destination is, if there's no clear idea of where the destination is, then how do you know where to go? Like, how do you know if it's left foot in front of the right foot or the right foot in front of the left foot? How would you know, right? You got to have a clear understanding of your destination. So again, if I'm bringing, what I'm learning from these interviews with Navy SEALs is all about is the clear destination for them, obviously going through BUDS, is become a Navy SEAL. Save lives, be a badass, kick butt, right? To get there, you have to go through a series of mind-numbing, painful, physical tests that you must pass. You can't get there. Now, to get there, they're compartmentalizing and just taking it one foot in front of the other. But they have a clear destination in mind. Now, do we, as people just living our day-to-day lives, do we have a clear understanding of the direction that we're trying to get to? I would assume many of us do not. We might have a clear understanding of where we want to be tomorrow, like Taco Bell or, McDonald's or something. But we got to have a clear understanding of where our destination is. Because we can only be effective if we live with the end in mind. I've heard this term, and I'm sure many of you have heard this term before, but it's a lot of engineers, a lot of carpenters, things like that. We'll always say measure twice, cut once, right? Basically, make sure the blueprint of your life is created with purpose. Make sure the blueprint for this house has been checked and rechecked and checked again before we start pouring concrete, before we start putting down the wood. Because to redo everything over some mistakes, that's going to cost you double or triple in money and time. Right? So have the end in mind. Right? Like businesses, you don't, I'm sure many people do this, but you don't just throw yourself out there and think you're going to succeed in business. You got to think about the products and services you're going to offer. You got to think about who you're going to market this to. You got to think about, does the market really want this? What's the offer that you're going to bring to the market, right? What are some marketing strategies, right? What are some internal strategies? There's a lot of pieces that go into it, right? Like being a parent, right? A lot of times you might not plan to have kids and it just happens. But you got to have I feel, right, before you get married, right, you guys are engaged and things like that. But before everything's all said and done, you got to have a clear understanding of what kind of family you guys want to build. What kind of family do you want? What kind of dynamic do you want? Right? Because of just throwing yourself into it, yes, you can probably figure some stuff out. But are you on the same journey, on the same path? Right? Do you both have the end in mind? So that's very important. So really, habit one, being proactive, is saying that you are the creator, right? You are here to create things. That's what being proactive is. So go and create. Habit two is the first creation. All right. So if we're thinking about business, or if we're thinking about leadership, there's always this dynamic between leadership and management. Is it the same? Is it not? Right. So Covey talks a lot about Peter Drucker throughout this book. Peter Drucker and Viktor Frankl. Not in the same way, right? Because Drucker was a business leadership expert and aficionado, whereas Viktor Frankl was a psychologist who wrote a great book, who survived the Holocaust. But there's always this dynamic between leadership and management, and what is the difference? So in the book, it says leadership has to come first before management. Leadership is about what I want to accomplish. Management is about efficiency, right? And I've heard this many times. I'm sure you might have heard this as well. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. Again, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. So if our inner compass, if you will, if set correctly, will always point us in the right direction. Now, everybody knows how much of a pain in the butt it is if you're heading in the wrong direction. Now, where we set our, the compass has to be set in order to know that north is north and south is south, and so forth. So think to yourself where your inner compass is set, because if set correctly, you will be headed in the right direction. When we think about efficiency and effectiveness, right? Effectiveness does not depend on the effort that we expend, but rather if the effort we are expending is in the right jungle. So efficiency is just doing things, quicker, faster, less resources. And efficiency is great. However, if it's not effective, right? Meaning to be efficient, you have to sacrifice safety or security. Well, then you're not really effective. So it's always leadership first, management second. So it's like efficient management, right? You've got the right players. The costs are managed, right? Efficient management without effective leadership is like trying to straighten the deck chairs on the Titanic. Right? Because, look, whoever's been in a leadership position understands that leadership is extremely hard. Right? And I think a lot of times in our lives, we are trying to always be efficient with our time, with our budget, right? Our minds are always going towards this efficiency. However, we need to start thinking about effectiveness. And really, effectiveness is determined by our values. So if we want to be effective in our lives, we must clarify the values in our life. Right? Because if we are to be proactive, then we must be self-aware. We must understand what makes us complacent. We must understand what our limiting beliefs are, right? So in that sense, if we want to be proactive, then we must be self-aware. Because I think a lot of times we get jaded in today's society with social media and this whole me movement, right? Everything's about shouting to the wind to pay attention to me, right? That's sort of what it seems to be. But that's not success, right? If I go on Instagram and I start posting pictures about me and my rented Ferraris and girls in bikinis and in front of a rented house near Malibu, everyone's like, that's what I want. That is success, right? I don't know what happened, and I don't know why that is the barometer for success, but it is in our society, unfortunately. But I think we must understand that success is not in having things. It's about self-mastery. Because I don't know about you, but there's so many times that I've wanted something, right? Whether it's like a MacBook or whatever, like a Rolex, doesn't matter. And then you get those things, and it feels good for like maybe 10 minutes. And then that feeling's gone. So really, you've wanted this thing all this time for 10 minutes of pleasure. And then that's it. Because, those the things didn't bring you any more value to your character. right? And as I'm like rereading this book, it's starting to bring all these things in mind, right? And it's funny how when you read a book when you're like 25, 30, and then you read it when you're 36 again, um, it's becoming more impactful. Now I'm seeing it from a different lens. Now I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an entrepreneur. So it brings a different mindset. So I see why people always recommend reread books that you've already read that have a lot of value to you, because you do start to see different things. Now, the great caveat to all of this is that you can become anything that you want to be, because you are able to re-script your life, re-script yourself. Right? That's thus far, that is what habit 1 and 2 is about. Habit 1 is really like, okay, if you haven't been proactive in your life, well, guess what? You can be proactive. So be proactive. Right? Be the creator of your life. Then habit 2 says this is the first creation then. And the first creation is begin with the end in mind. What is the destination that you would like to create? And start from there. Now, when you start to begin each day with those values in mind, now what we need, right? Everyone's heard this, a mission statement. So Stephen Covey is big on mission statements, right? I use the Franklin Covey planning system. It's like a planner, and I get the 7 Habits package every year, and in there is like a personal mission statement. I don't know what you call it, instruction or writing section. So I try to do that every year. But he wants you to write a personal mission statement because you want to write down the character, contributions, and the values and principles that define you. Right? And some of the examples could be, succeed at home first before leaving the house. Remember the people that are involved in your lives. Defend those who are absent. Be sincere, yet decisive. Hustle while you wait. Maintain a positive attitude. These are just, some examples, right? But your personal mission statement is kind of like your personal constitution, right? For those of you who are American citizens and don't know what the Constitution is, the Constitution is the foundational standard for which the United States is governed and built upon. That is why we have the freedoms that we have. And that's the reason, one of the many reasons why we're one of the richest countries in the world. And we as citizens get to enjoy many of these luxuries because of this Constitution that was written almost 300 years ago. Right? But your mission statement is your personal constitution. Right? Because no matter what evil president comes into office with some ill intent, the Constitution, for the most part, will be able to block any of these things from happening because it separated the powers, it separated the responsibilities, to put checks and balances, right? It defined these things for our government. That's why, as much as you would like to think that President Donald Trump could be a tyrannical leader, he cannot. he'll be blocked. That's what the Constitution was for. So, you need to have a personal constitution for yourself, right? It's your foundation, your standard. Because if you're trying to just wing it in life, it's going to be all over the place. And if that's what you've been doing so far and you're lost, that's probably why. And I'm right with you. Start here. Set yourself on a clear path towards the end of your life so that, the journey that you're on is actually the one you want to be on. And it's one that you really want to have a meaning in a sense of fulfillment for. Because, we get one life, right? So, let's make it right. And really go through the book he goes very in depth on how to write a personal mission statement. I mean, this thing goes like 20 pages long from the chapter. So about almost half the chapter is about this personal mission statement, which tells you how important it is. But to write one, we must identify our center. So the center of our compass. We must begin with what Covey calls, our circle of influence. So he kind of addresses this in habit number 1, but the circle of influence are things that we can control in our life, thus influence. Thus it has influence over us. So we have to make sure our influences are value-driven and proactive components where we can really focus our time and energy. So, for example, our values could be, always protect children, right? Our values could be a protector. You are a protector, meaning a protector of family, children, whatever. Your values could be always be positive. Always have a positive outlook. Always speak positively. Right? Those kind of things. Because that's where we want to focus our time and energy. Right? If your values are let's gossip and ruin other people's lives, then that's where you're really going to focus your time and energy. And that's what you're going to try to do. And then Covey presents several centers that we can focus on. And those centers include spouse-centeredness, family-centeredness, money-centeredness, work, possessions, pleasure, friend and or enemies, the church, and self. And to identify the center, we have to look closely at our life support factors, so those around us. Right? What is your life like? Who's around you? Right? Are these the people that you want around you? Right? Again, if you're a drug addict, then you're probably going to be around a lot of other drug addicts. If you're a criminal, you'll probably be around a lot of other criminals. Now, is that what you want? I don't know, but that's up to you. And if those values need to change in your life and you need to change your circle of friends and your life support, well, then that is what must be done. Right? So ultimately, we get to a principle center, right? These are our deep fundamental truths, classic truths, generic common denominators of our life. After everything, what gets boiled down to what, right? And, your principles could be treat others as you would like to be treated. You can have principles of love. Love those less fortunate than I. Love those who are more fortunate than I. Because what you get from a principle-centered life is a power of self-awareness, power of personal knowledge, power of proactiveness, power of unrestricted attitudes, behaviors, and actions. We need to live a more principle-centered life. And I think a lot of this stuff has been lost. Which is, I think, in my opinion, one of the reasons why, if you turn on the news, there's so much hate. There's so much negativity. Now, take away the political biases. Left, right, well, whatever, center, up, down, I don't care. But there is a pattern that you see, and it's anger and hatred towards one side or the other. Don't know what happened, but this is what it's become. And again, it's about a me movement. And the principles have been lost. And I think we need to all go back and find this principle and start to focus our lives like a laser beam, because this is not healthy. All this hate is not healthy, right? No more blaming. Let's be proactive and have an end in mind. All right. So to summarize, we begin with the end in mind, because knowing and understanding our destination, can we only then become the vessel that will take us there, right? So this vessel must have our principles, and those principles and values we take and we start to write a written constitution, a written mission statement, if you will, that will be our guide. Now, every day we got to act accordingly by how we want to be remembered for. It's important. And we have one life, so this is all we get. So let's make it worthwhile for ourselves, our families, and our circle of friends and colleagues. So let's be responsible where we decide to take our life, because it's not just ourselves. There's other people involved as well. So thank you for listening to this episode. Next episode, we'll keep continuing on through this book. Again, get your copy, read it. The link is in the show notes. All right. Until next time, be curious, be humble, be masterful.